it's Corey, and today I'm going to teach you how to transpose. You're going to learn how to be able to play a lot more songs using a much smaller pool of chords, which is a really valuable tool, especially for beginning ukulele players. So let's get started. What is transposition? Transposition is when you take a pitch, or in the case of ukulele, often it's a chord, and you're going to raise or lower that pitch or chord by a series of half steps in order to change the sound that it creates. This is all based off of a chromatic scale, which if you're wanting to know more about that, I actually have a video all about the pitches of the ukulele and the chromatic scale. You can find that in the cards to kind of give you a base for what I'm going to be talking about today. On the ukulele, there are two different ways that you can transpose chords. The first way, and a lot of times people think it's the easiest way to transpose on the ukulele, is by using a capo. A capo is either a plastic or sometimes it's made out of metal for ukulele. You do this by creating a shorter string for the instrument, which ultimately creates a higher pitched sound. Often capos are used a lot more commonly on guitars, but they are often used on ukuleles too. I have a video that talks all about how to use a capo, so I'll let you explore that, and I'll put it in the cards so you can check that out. And for each fret of the fretboard, it's raising all those pitches of the strings by a half step. Now, I don't actually use capos that much personally. I don't enjoy them on the ukulele. The other way that you can do transposition is actually just knowing the theory behind it and manually transposing it. Starting with the capo, the pros of using a capo is that they're typically pretty easy to use. As long as you know how many steps you're trying to raise your pitch by, you then just have to count up that many frets on the fretboard and put a capo on that fret. Another benefit of this is that you can use the same chord shape. This can be really appealing for people, especially if they're still in that beginner stage where they only really know the four basic chords of A minor, C major, F major, and G major, because it really opens up a lot more chords that they can use without having to actually learn any new chord shapes. When you're using a capo on the ukulele, often the tuning is not very good, especially if you're using a smaller size ukulele like a soprano or a concert. This isn't typically as big of a deal if you're working on a tenor or a baritone uke, but it can cause tuning issues with the smaller sizes. Also, when you use a capo, you have to retune your instrument to the new tuning of each of the strings. You can't just put on the capo and then play, because often it's not going to be the exact pitches that you need. And then finally, it's a piece of equipment you have to purchase. Having to get another piece of equipment to be able to play can be a bit of a barrier for some people. Now, in my opinion, the pros for doing manual transposition far outweigh the cons of it. And with that, the cons basically are just that you need to know how to actually do it, which requires some music theory knowledge. And then also it does require a larger body of chords. When you do manual transposition, you're actually changing the chord shape because you're playing completely new chords. Now, the pros of learning how to manually transpose, I think, far outweigh the cons. For one, you end up developing better music theory skills. Additionally, you don't end up needing another piece of equipment. If you're out and about somewhere, you don't have to worry about slapping on a capo or having one with you in order to play in a variety of different keys. Also, you don't have to retune the ukulele. In this case, you can just make the new chord shape and you're still using the standard G, C, E, A tuning for the ukulele. You might be thinking, why would I transpose anyway? The main reason why I use it is because it allows you to make the chords easier, which I often do for my beginner ukulele players. But a lot of people also transpose songs just because it will give them a better range for their singing voice. So if you have a key that's set too low, you might not be able to sing that low, whereas same thing as if you have a key and the melody then is a little higher, you might not be able to sing that high of a range. So being able to transpose will allow you to be able to choose the key for the song that works best for your vocal range. And then of course, there are just some instruments that are set naturally in a different key and they have to transpose all the time. So depending on how you choose to actually transpose, whether it's with a capo or you're doing it manually, pick the one that's gonna work best for you. The first thing to know is the frets on the fretboard of the ukulele are already divided out by half steps. I'm from the US, so we call these half steps, but in other places of the world and other countries, they might refer to them as semitones. So for instance, right now, this fourth string on the ukulele is a G, but if I were to raise it by a half step, it's now gonna be a G sharp. Or you could also enharmonically view that as an A flat as well. The number one thing to remember is if you raise one chord or lower a chord by a half step, you have to do it with all the other chords that are played in that song. You can't just transpose a single chord in a song, because then that single chord will be in a different key and it won't work with the rest of the chords played. So then you have to decide how many half steps do you want to raise or lower the pitch. A good example of this is Taylor Swift's Anti-Hero. The original chords for this song are A major, E major, B major, and then C sharp minor. Now, most of you would probably pause right there when you see that E major chord. And you might think to yourself, there's no way I'm gonna be able to play that. This is where transposition is really important. So if I were just to play the opening line of Anti-Hero, played in its original key that Taylor Swift's singing in her recording, it would sound like this. I have this thing where I get older, but just never wiser. Midnights become my afternoons. But for a lot of people, that might be too difficult. The first thing I'm going to try to do is figure out what chords do I want to use. In this case, I want to make a beginner-friendly version of the song. So I want to try to change the chords of this song to use C major, A minor, F major, and G major. The first chord I'm going to start with is my A major chord. So because I know I need to transpose this, I need to get it to a point where it's going to have one of those chords. So I'm going to just continue to transpose up or down. In this case, the closest chord for me would be either an F major or a C major. So I'm going to then go down in a pitch in order to get to F. And this is really important in this next step. If you have a major chord, when transposing, you have to maintain the quality of that chord. That means it has to stay major. If you have a minor chord, you also have to maintain the quality and it needs to stay minor. So I still know I'm going to end up with 3 major chords in the song and 1 minor chord. Using the chart, I'm going to first find A major. Then I'm going to go what looks directionally up on my chart to then a G sharp, to then a G, to then an F sharp, and finally landing on an F. I now have to change the chords of each of my other chords by 4 half steps down. So for E major, I would start with that E, I would go 1 half step down to a D sharp, another half step to a D, then I'd go to a C sharp, and finally end on a C. I'm going to do the same thing then with my B major and C sharp minor, ultimately getting me a G and an A minor. So now I've gone from A to E to B to C sharp minor to then F to C to G to A minor. So when I've played that opening line before, listen to how high or low the melody sounded. I have this thing where I get older, but just never wiser. Midnights become my afternoons. Now listen to it and how it sounds in the transposed key. I have this thing where I get older, but just never wiser. Midnights become my afternoons. You should be able to tell that my melody line is a lot lower set than it was in the original key. So that's what I mean by you do have to be careful about the key that you're presenting in, because it might not be vocally the best one for you. If you'd like to print out the transposition table that I have, you can find that on my Patreon, or it's available a ton of other places online too. I hope you found this helpful. If you have any questions, make sure to comment down below. I do also have a music theory for ukulele playlist on my channel. So if you're wanting just to start upping your general music skills so you can start tackling more difficult projects, make sure to check that out. I'll have it linked in the cards too. But otherwise, I hope you guys have a great day and I'll see you next time. Bye.